there are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie podcast. For instance, number 1. You can never have sex while listening. Sex equals death, okay? Number 2, you can never drink or do drugs while you're listening. The sin factor. It's the sin. It's an extension of number 1. Number 3, never, ever, ever, under any circumstances, pause the podcast and say, I'll be right back. Because you won't be back.
Starting the podcast.
Welcome to Franchise Flicks. My name is Ted, and joining me are my co-hosts Andy and Zach. On this podcast, we task ourselves with watching movie franchises, breaking them down, and reviewing them, including franchises we've seen and loved, as well as franchises we've never seen and frankly avoided. Today we're getting spooky for Halloween and talking about the meta horror series that criticizes itself and its genre so much that it's going to be difficult for us to nitpick it, Scream. The series includes Scream, Scream 2, Scream 3, and Scream 4. So, we usually like to start these episodes off with our experience levels on these franchises, so I'm going to let either Andy or Zach take it away with where they're at with these.
Well, I have never seen a Scream before. Before we decided to do this, I've never seen a Scream movie. I think I've seen some bits and pieces of the movies around Halloween time here or there. I'm sure of it, but never saw them. And I really liked the series. I thought it was actually really fun. Even though I'm not like a horror guy, but it's not horror. It's more like, I don't know. I liked the intense meta feel of the series. I thought it was just such a cool way to make a movie. Really unique, and Wes Craven is forever a genius. So that is, I don't, again, never really saw him before, but as somebody who actually enjoys watching movies now, it was really fun. It was a cool adventure.
So I had seen all of these previously. I think I saw, not obviously in theaters when the first one came out, but definitely like when that had come out on VHS, I think we rented it as a family. So I remember seeing that as a kid. Scream 2, I remember scenes from, so I must have seen it at some point. Scream 3, I remembered a lot of that plot. So I was like, okay, yep, I must have seen this one before. Scream 4, I couldn't remember a lot of it, so I must have only seen like bits and pieces of it, not actually watched the whole thing all the way. But because I was already familiar with this, watching it back again, like, it's a completely different movie in my head from what I imagined when I was a kid. So that was kind of cool, being like, wow, this is way more cheesy than I remember, or how things played out. I was like, oh, that's not how I remember it. So that was a pretty cool process to go back through and watch the series all over again.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I can imagine like watching as a kid, probably just thinking this is a standard horror movie rather than realizing it's playing on all the tropes and getting super meta. But as far as my experience level, I'm right there with Zach. Like, I've seen bits and pieces and I know about Scream, but not really until super recently did I realize it was like infamous for being meta. I just thought it was another slasher series that they made a bunch of sequels of, and I assumed it was the thing it was making fun of, essentially. And I couldn't be happier to be wrong about it, though, because I enjoyed it quite a bit. And really, my only experience with Scream was one year for Halloween. It made me remember that I went as Ghostface just because I thought it looked cool. And
not knowing who Ghostface was?
Not a clue. I just thought it was a scary horror villain. And I'm like, yeah, I'm doing this. But I remember hating being in that fucking costume because that goddamn mask just traps everything in it. If I had that mask today during COVID, during the pandemic, I would be all set because it just got drenched with condensation every time I breathed. It was horrendous. So yeah, that's my experience level with it. Just a mask, pretty much.
Yeah, I think the mask is. I mean, how could you have a better totem for a movie. I mean, how like, iconic is that mask?
Well, I think some of my misunderstandings of the plot, or like what I thought was supposed to happen, I think actually came from Scary Movie, which is the parody of the parody.
Right.
It goes another level of meta, and there's a lot of, because the Ghostface is also the villain in that, so like there were a lot of things there that I was probably thinking, oh yeah, that's Scary Movie actually, and confusing the two because it's been so long.
Yeah, I don't think we'd enjoy. Oh, what were you going to say? Sorry.
I was just going to say I frequently picture Damon Wayans in Scream, even though I know for sure he's not.
Yeah. And I don't think we'd enjoy watching the Scary Movie franchise now. I think it's so lowbrow compared to what this is. Well, why don't we get into the synopses real quick so everybody knows what we're talking about in case they're uninitiated, and then we'll get right into it. So for Scream 1, Wes Craven reinvented and revitalized the slasher horror genre with this modern horror classic, which manages to be funny, clever, and scary as a fright-masked knife maniac stalks high school students in middle-class suburbia. Craven is happy to provide both tension and self-parody as the body count mounts, but the victims aren't the only ones you'd expect. Scream 2, Sidney, played by Neve Campbell, and tabloid reporter Gale Weathers, Courtney Cox, survived the events of the first Scream movie, but their nightmare isn't over when two college students are murdered at a sneak preview of Stab, a movie based on the events in the first film. It's clear a copycat killer is on the loose. Sidney and Gale, as well as fellow survivors Deputy Dewey, played by David Arquette, and Randy, played by Jamie Kennedy, have to find out who is behind the new murder spree before they all end up dead. Scream 3, the next installment in the Scream series, is set in Hollywood, where Stab 3 is being shot, with Gale Weathers and Dewey Riley on set as advisors to Jennifer Jolie. Unfortunately, a killer decides to off the cast in order of the screenplay, and only Sid Prescott, now in hiding until the killer tracks her down, can solve the riddle. And finally, Scream 4, it's been many years since the Ghostface killer cut a deadly path through the town of Woodsboro. In order to get over the trauma of those horrific events, Sidney Prescott has written a self-help book. She returns to Woodsboro for her book tour and reconnects with old friends Gale Weathers and Sheriff Dewey. However, Sidney's arrival also sparks the return of Ghostface, putting Sidney and everyone she loves in danger. Well, those are the synopses. So everybody has kind of an idea of what we're going with here. And let's get into some of the plot points and plot stuff, I guess. Damn.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a lot of plot stuff.
Absolutely.
It's funny. What are the... You said really like you didn't realize it was like supposed to be so meta, and I thought the same thing. Like going in, like I didn't realize like that was the point of this series, and now looking back on it, it feels so stupid because like that is the point of the series, is that it's a horror movie about basically a horror movie. I don't know how I missed that in the pop culture just in general, but it almost took me by surprise. And then it like exponentially grows every movie. It's like this Scream 2, they were watching a movie about the events in Scream 1, which was basically a horror movie trope to begin with. So it like just goes deeper and deeper. It's like the inception of horror movies.
Yeah.
And it got so far to the point of the last one where it was like, now everything has to be like groundbreaking. Everything has to be different. It like deconstructed the horror genre. What is it called? I'm blanking on the knife me.
Slasher?
Yeah, slasher. There we go. Slasher horror genre, where it just kind of like takes what originally was created beforehand, which was the trope carried on in the previous three movies, and the fourth one says, yeah, it's going to be all that, but like with a twist on top of it, because it's the last one in the series.
Well, that kind of brings you to one of the best plot devices in these movies is Randy Meeks, played by Jamie Kennedy, who just serves the purpose of explaining the rules of each iteration of these movies. Unfortunately, he's not anywhere to be seen in the fourth one. because he's one of my favorite characters just because of that. He does that so well.
I love him.
Of explaining all of that, and everybody pretty much hates him because of it. It's just a perfect character, I feel. But, just an example from the first one, you may not survive the movie if you have sex, if you drink, or you do drugs, and everybody fucking boos him. And that's just a fun scene. Or if you say, I'll be right back, and what does Matthew Lillard do immediately? Goes and gets a beer and says, I'll be right back. So like just super fun stuff like that he ends up going through and gives you an idea of like, this is what this one's going to do. So it sets you up for all of that, but also sets you up to have some expectations, I guess, stilted in some ways toward the end. That they kind of go with some twists here and there, but they generally follow the same direction as the rules that he sets up early on in the movies.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, like the movie is full of this purposeful foreshadowing, but also purposeful misdirection. Like it kind of balances that so well. I think that's really a strength of Wes Craven. It's like, yeah, this is like what you're expecting the trope to be. And yeah, this is pretty much how it's going to happen. But here's also like, it kind of takes a left turn in there too. I thought, and like watching it the first time through, especially, Scream 1, and really, the whole series did a great job at like keeping you kind of guessing through the whole thing. Like, who is it actually? And I just thought it was like, well, this is just too obvious. It's a cheesy movie. And then they started to get a little more, deep into it. And I thought he did a great job at like actually keeping suspense, and it's not just a cheesy, horror trope. And like there is going to be some misdirection in there, and everything, every scene, every symbol is really important. So I thought he did a great job at all 4 movies. I really liked it.
I think I'd agree with everything except for the second film. I feel like that's the one where it felt like we jumped the shark early, and the series comes back with 3 and 4 to close off nicely. But I really felt like the tropiness of it is brought out in the second one too much, where it feels like too much of a straight to DVD release kind of movie that plays on, this is being like a silly slasher movie, a meta critique of the genre, as opposed to the other ones, which they were doing that, but they also told really good stories that were more believable.
You don't think a copycat is believable? I actually thought that was pretty good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like the ultimate, like the reveal and whatnot of everything. I'm talking about like the overall plot though. Like, okay, now we go to college, and it just so happens that like all these characters are at the same college, and they're all studying film. Like it just like it doubled down on all the things from the last movie.
Boy Meets World horror version.
Yeah, that's exactly like, oh, we're going off to college now, and then like.
Right.
It didn't feel as authentic as the last movie. And then the third one does get back into that authenticity feeling where I definitely feel like, okay, this is grounded in reality, but playing on the slasher film tropes. The second one just took me out of it.
Yeah, so I kind of get what you're saying with that, Andy, because immediately after that movie's a success, studios want to make a new one. So that movie came out right after, a year later, I think. So, of course, for the studio, their thought is immediately the next step is they're all going to college, and it's all the same characters who survived. And, of course, everybody's going to meet up in some way, shape, or form, all happenstance. So I think you've got a really tough ask for Wes Craven in that movie of make the sequel that is the thing you're making fun of to begin with, but also try to put in there that meta humor, that meta commentary that's going to shit all over that at the same time.
Well, it's like outdo the meta,
right.
It's like a challenge.
Yeah. And he probably felt pressure to put more of that stuff in there to counterbalance how much of a stereotypical sequel it was going to be. But,
right.
It still suffers because of it. And I get where you're coming from.
Well, can I just say the intros to these movies are probably my favorite intros to any movie ever. I just love how it goes right into it. This is the story we're telling, and then it just expands on it from there. It's quick. Like it gets you right into it. It makes that movie, like, it just sets the scene right from the beginning, so you're invested. You're like, okay, so this is where we're at, and then everything else from that point on is gonna be important in kind of the discovery of the detective work from your main characters. And so like you pay attention to everything, because like I said before, everything is important. All the symbolism, all the foreshadowing, every line that the character says, it could be important in like the ends, when you find out who the killer is. And it is very structured in that way, but I think the intros to these are a really good device at just getting you right into the movie.
Yeah, the first one is the phone call, which is perfect for the 90s.
Right.
Everyone's got your home phone. You're used to picking it up, answering, like, who is this, right before you get all the caller ID stuff. And cell phones are pretty new, so that's why they use the term like cellular phones in the first one when they're referring to them.
Right.
The second movie, this is where it goes into the cold open is the movie theater scene of like showing Stab. Then the third one is the guy that gets framed from the last two, or the first movie. It's him and like his death. I really like that one. I think that was like one of my favorites thus far, I think, of the cold openings. And then the fourth one I didn't really care for, because that was the one where it switches, like it goes like back into like the movie, and then like back into the movie, and then back into Scream 4. So it's just kind of like, I don't know, I figured out what they were doing and I got tired of it quickly. But I like the other ones. Probably with the third one, obviously the first one's the best one. I guess they can't compete with like what it did. But in terms of the other ones, the sequels that come after it, the third one I like the most.
Yeah, and that kind of goes, like, at least for the first one, back to the misdirection thing, because being uninitiated to these things, and you see a superstar like Drew Barrymore in the first scene of the movie, you're immediately thinking she's gonna be the protagonist in this.
That's a good point.
And it immediately subverts your expectations by having her killed off in the first scene, and then that establishes the trope of, we're going to put some pretty big name stars in the beginning of these movies for bit parts, and that's just going to be what we do. And like that, they go to the nth degree in the fourth one, and I agree, Andy, it takes you out of it a little bit by like the third one. I think they go like one or two too many, but it's still a super fun thing that you're expecting the whole time. Like, oh, well, Jada Pinkett Smith's here in the second one. Obviously, she's dead in some capacity by the end of this scene. It's just a fun little tidbit that they establish their own tropes. We talked about that in the Indiana Jones episode. It's really cool to see a series establish its own tropes and then, set those up for future movies going forward.
Absolutely. This is another one of those movies, like you said, with Indiana Jones, that it's like, it almost seems like, oh my God, this is such a cheesy thing. This, we've seen this trope a million times, but then you go back and oh, Scream actually set the tone, set this trope. Like there's a lot of moments like that in here where you're like, oh man, this was the original in some of those tropes. It's kind of funny to think about after seeing, like, because they are very cheesy. Like they're not just your straight up gore, slasher films. They're really tropey, they're really cheesy, and it's really charming, and it still has the gravitas to be an influence on other movies. It's really interesting.
Absolutely. And those even play off of each other as they go forward. I really like how those get more interesting. Like, even though the fourth one, they do it little too many times, I really like some of the lines from that one, especially when it gets to the one in real life with the girl that I think is from like Friday Night Lights or whatever, and the killer calls her on the phone and like says, you're playing the part of the dumb blonde with the big tits, and then she retorts, like, not even flinching, I've got a 4.0 and a super high IQ, so you can fuck off with that. It just fun stuff like that, where a character in the moment where they should be super terrified is just like, excuse me, I take exception to that. It's just interesting how they weave those little things into these movies and make them super fun and campy, but at the same time, like, it just works somehow.
I don't know if this is the appropriate place to talk about this idea, but I think it fits with like the plot points kind of thrown throughout these movies are these nice little Easter eggs to other horror franchises.
Sure.
Like in the first one, you get the custodial worker who's got the Freddy Krueger sweater on. I think his name is Freddy. I really like that one because it's just like a nice little subtle one of the sweater being recognized in Wes Craven. And then what's another good one that sticks out to me? That's the one that just jumped out of my mind when we were talking about like the things that we really like about all the things that happen in the plot. I like those little Easter eggs when they came up.
Yeah, one that sticks out to me now that you mention it is in the first one when Jamie Kennedy's character is watching Friday the 13th or Halloween rather. I'm sorry. I'm not super well versed in these movies, so I kind of mix those two up. But he's yelling at Jamie Lee Curtis. He has the same first name as her, and he's yelling, Jamie, turn around, while Ghostface is right behind him. He luckily survives that, but it's just a fun little nod, just like he is in the exact same scenario that she is. And it seems like in every one of the movies, they have at least one scene where an older horror movie is playing in the background in some capacity, which is always nice to see in these as well.
I think probably my favorite like trope that they use every time, like about like the other horror movies and like these are the rules of horror movies. They always come back. They do that so well. That's such a funny thing that they do, like with these once they finally triumph over the killer, they find the killer, they stop them, and they always come back. I think is my favorite because they just finally just one tap him in the head or double tap him in the head.
Yeah,
I love it.
And then in 3,
so
like going way too far in 3, because Randy establishes in the video that, well, your villain's probably going to be superhuman. So Dewey keeps shooting, what's his name, in the chest, and then they yell, the head, finally shoots him in the head, and then he goes down.
Okay. Speaking of Dewey, if we can like kind of just move into acting and characters real quick.
Sure.
David Arquette is terrible.
But in a really fun way.
Really?
I think he's like he worked for the character because like it was well cast. I think he's so bad. But I actually it's interesting because I did find like his character kind of charming, but like the way he walks when after his accident, it kind of drove me crazy. I was like, that's a little insensitive. But I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
No, I thought the same thing too. And I noticed that in the third one, it goes away. It's no longer there. So
that's true.
Hopefully some physical therapy really got that issue taken care of. So he was no longer, affected by the stab wound.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's eventually got to progress to the point where he can be Sheriff Dewey in the fourth one. He can't be Sheriff Dewey and have a bum leg.
Yeah, or just a numb half of his body, apparently.
Yeah. No, but I agree with you, though. I think David Arquette's probably a B grade actor at best, but I think that worked for this movie because that's like playing on that trope. Like several times in these movies, the characters talk about how bad the acting is in these horror movies.
Right.
And like whether it's naturally that they're doing it or they're being coached to do it, they do that very well and make you feel like you're in a regular horror movie that's also really playing off the tropes of horror movies. So I think it does a good job of grounding it within that kind of universe, but also playing off of that stuff as well.
It's true. It does kind of like even just the acting itself kind of gives you that bird's eye view of the story. You know what I mean? Like it just kind of it takes you out enough to kind of be that executor over like the storyline. You know what I mean? Like it gives you like you know you're watching a story and you're still kind of immersed in trying to figure it out with them and what's going to happen, but it takes you just one level beyond being immersed in it to like see it in a macro view and know that it's a movie. I actually think it's a really good job of the direction of the actors to be able to do that.
Who's the deputy? I don't know if that's her title, but the female police officer in the fourth one.
Oh, I'll never figure out her
Female
name.
police officer.
Yeah,
The one who has a crush on Dewey. I know who you're talking about, but I'll never be able to tell you her name.
well, I liked the misdirect with her character because this was the probably of the four movies the one I was the least familiar
right.
with going into this one. So the whole time I was thinking, is she a part of this? Because I liked
Right.
what they were doing with her character, where she was clearly obsessed with, now Sheriff Dewey. She was doing all these things. They introduced this idea of like her kind of being an alpha female conflict with Gale Weathers, who's now the wife of Dewey. So like I was thinking that, okay, this is what they're leading up to, where okay, I'm gonna follow along, watch, like you were saying, Zach, with these characters as they're going through. But up above, I'm paying attention. I'm watching what she's doing.
Right.
I'm seeing what,
Right.
like, when does she leave? When does she make a phone call? Like all the little clues that are sprinkled in the previous movies as to like who the killers are. I was like focused in on her right away. Because
they're kind of projecting that to you, like this is somebody you want to pay attention to, whether you do or not. Like they're projecting that in the way she presents herself.
Yeah, and they do that throughout the movies. I think that's a really strong example of it, especially in that one that probably us more than anybody were super unfamiliar with, even with like our very tertiary knowledge of these movies. But even in the first one, I thought for the longest time until the end of it that Dewey was somehow involved because, that there was the scene toward the beginning when Sid gets attacked and he's holding the mask in the front. And it's like, okay, are they saying he really found it or was he taking it off? What's happening here? And it'd be super convenient because he's a cop for him to
Phone
be
call
able
at
to
their house too.
Right. And his sister was best friends with Sydney. So that's another connection. He knows where she is at all times. And then there was also a line dropped about horror movies. I don't necessarily remember which one it was, but they talked about like their favorite horror movies to each other. And like suddenly Dewey sounded very confident and smarter than he had been throughout the entire movie in that one little moment. It's like, that's the whole thing with the Ghostface Killer in the first movie is he's quizzing everybody on horror movies when he's on the phone with them. God, Dewey could be a suspect, but they throw you for a loop. I mean, that one in particular really throws you off when they throw the obvious, well, it couldn't be Billy because, he did have the cell phone, but you're not going to make the killer be the guy that you first suspect in the movie. But
it makes you go back and forth between Billy and Dewey and, some other characters like Randy. Like at some point you're like, oh, maybe it's Randy because he knows so much. It does a good job at kind of giving you reason to suspect all of these characters, right? Giving them sort of a motive, I guess, for lack of a better term. But it does leave you clues throughout the whole movie to lead you to the right answer. And so that's, again, a great example of having this campiness to it, but also being like a serious whodunit slasher film. Any other like acting performances that really stand out to you? I know that's kind of where we're at right now. We talked about Dewey. Neve Campbell, does she like do it for you guys?
I mean, she does it for me in a certain way.
What do you mean does it?
All right, I'll give you my perspective on it. I don't really buy her as a protagonist. I get that they're the kind of character that they're going for, this headstrong, confident, capable woman. But I don't know. I didn't really buy it from Neve Campbell as a protagonist.
I more bought her as like the tropey, she even has a line in the first one about the killer stalking a dumb, big-titted teenager, essentially. And I think like she plays that well, but beyond that, that's like her role in the series. And, she just ends up being the center of all of it. And she's really more of a plot device, I think, kind of like Randy is, to just have a center point for the killers every time we have these movies. Because each time, whether it's if they have like an actual vendetta against Sydney, or if they're just interested in her because she survived, she's always the focal point, because she was the focal point in the first movie. It's like all these copycat killers, whether they want to exact personal revenge or they're just there to fuck around and kill people, she's always the focal point. And I think, I don't know, she's fine.
Yeah, and I would kind of argue against the idea of her being the protagonist. I get it from like a very just generic use of the term, like she's the lead female character. But what this franchise does is it's like a trope on all of these things. So she's not necessarily the protagonist. She just happens to be the lead female character, as Ted was saying, to play out this trope, to be the connective tissue, more so of a plot device than necessarily a character. I think our main characters, our protagonists, are more like Dewey and Gale, because they're the ones who actually go through different struggles and grow from these films. Sydney's like always the same. She doesn't really grow throughout the movies, other than just like becoming more and more paranoid about like her life situation, going from rightfully so, going from nothing as a teenager, no paranoia other than some leftover trauma from the death of her mother, but going so far as in the like third movie, we get how she's constantly locking things. They do the whole like showing the window open and closed and like that playing on her psyche. So less so of like a main character that you're kind of like rooting for as the protagonist versus an antagonist, but just like another character among this what's a good way of describing this?
Ensemble?
Yes, an ensemble of characters that all fill into the horror movie trope.
That's a fair perspective. I think that's the right way to look at it. I mean, I definitely like Courtney Cox. I thought was great. She's one of my favorites throughout the series for sure. I thought she was awesome. Played out the, another trope, but you're right. You do feel yourself kind of rooting for her more than Sydney in some ways, where Sydney is always the victim in this, or the hunted, I guess you could say, right? But that's a good perspective to look at it with. She's not necessarily the main character. She is that device to move the story forward. And it actually plays out really well. I mean, with all of the the copycats of and just the motive of Ghostface in particular, wanting to continue that with Sydney throughout the whole series, I thought was actually a pretty interesting through line throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, and they tend to have teams of people being the Ghostface killer. It's usually pairs of two. Other than, I think, three, unless I'm misremembering. I think Roman, her half-brother, was like acting alone. But it's always teams, and it seems like there's always one person who wants to exact some kind of revenge on Sydney for one thing or another, and then the other person is really just in it to kill people. So like in the first one, you've got Billy, and then you've got Stu, played by Matthew Lillard, and I really liked his character because he was just funny and goofy. But honestly, you'd never think he's the killer because he's just such a fucking doofus the whole time.
Not Shaggy.
And I mean,
Shaggy.
not Shaggy. Honestly, I can hear him talking about Scooby Snacks right now. And
I bet he did it for some Scooby Snacks. I bet that's what Billy Loomis told him.
He might have. Even though these movies were well before Scooby-Doo, maybe.
Well before Scooby-Doo? No way.
Yeah, the Scooby-Doo movie. The Scooby-Doo movie I'm talking about.
Oh.
Matthew Lillard wasn't in that movie until like 2000 or some shit.
2002.
Yeah,
All right. Are we doing Scooby-Doo next, boys?
There's a franchise we might have.
there might be enough. I think there might be 3. I don't want to, but we might do.
Hey, we said even avoided.
That's true. That's very true. And I think I've seen more Scooby-Doo movies than I'd originally seen of these, so there's that. But yeah, it's always the teams, and then you get to the second movie, and it's Billy's mom who wants revenge, and then her
Which I
partner is Mickey, who his motivation is just to see how far he can take it, and if he can get away with it by using the, I guess, blame game of saying that media and the gore and blood in media is what skews people's minds and makes them violent. And he's going to use that as sort of an insanity plea almost and see if he can get away with it. Then you get to the third one. Obviously, Roman has some beef because he's the half brother of Sydney and gets really upset that his mother left him and his father for her family. But then you get to the fourth movie, and what's her name? Is it Jill? Her cousin?
Yeah.
Jill, played by Emma Roberts. If I remember
Yeah.
correctly.
Yep, you're right.
She's a really good actress, and I really liked her motivation.
She's savage in that movie.
Yeah, she's absolutely savage, and I really liked her motivations. Like, it wasn't just the generic, like, I want revenge because you killed so and so or your mom did this. It was like, I'm jealous of your fame. I want your fame, and I'm also mad that I was attached to you by blood relation this whole time. And that's a super cool motivation that I really liked, and how she like set everything up beforehand and even after when she thought Sydney was dead. Just the smirk on her face when she's being carried out on the stretcher. Just amazing. I didn't really care for Macaulay Culkin's brother that much, but his motivation was kind of interesting too, because he wanted to make like the first live action real murder movie and broadcast it over the internet. But he gets kind of Matthew Lillarded when she stabs him and offs him right there.
Yeah. Like, as an acting performance, I think she was probably the best in the franchise. I loved her character. She was phenomenal.
He didn't expect it at all.
No, she was great. But one of the things that I liked about oh man, I don't even remember what I was going to say. We might have to cut this out. There was a good point for that movie that I had for sure. Oh, here it is. All right, so you say like she was jealous of the fame of Sydney, right? Like that was her kind of motivation. Like, you're my blood relative, and like you're so famous for this, and I've got nothing. But she I really like the theme of confusing fame for infamy. Like, her fame is not a good kind of fame. It's just vanity, really, that Jill is after. It's the vanity of what the position that Sydney is in, whether it's for good or not. And I think that was a really strong point for me. She wanted to be this. She thought she was getting fame, but really she went down in infamy. And I think there's a big difference with that, and I really like that theme in 4 in particular.
Well, I like this point, Zach, because this movie came out in 2011, and I think it predicted in a lot of ways what's to come over the next several years, because this is before Instagram. Like, this is right at the cusp of really becoming like internet famous, like that you can have a social media account and then be famous off of that. And that's what this movie was doing, was like, all right, here, not the character necessarily right away, but you get the two like film nerds who are recording everything, because that's the intent, is to make the live horror movie. But the idea is like, they're just kids like recording their lives. And I think one of the lines of dialogue, or lives, recording their lives. But one of the lines of dialogue is something to the effect like, this is the future. This is where, like what we're going to be doing all the time, is recording everything. And I was like, wow, okay. Yeah, that's what this movie is about, is becoming basically Instagram famous, except for this time it's not through your clothes or whatever you're doing, but it's by murdering people.
Like a really intense Logan Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with that one video of him in Japan, he actually came about as close to that as you can probably come.
That's exactly what I'm referring to. Yep.
Yeah, what a piece of shit. But yeah, that actually brings me to like the last big like plot point I wanted to talk about is like these movies, while they have like the meta commentary all the time, and specifically for horror movies, and they've got the misdirection. The other big thing in these movies is each one has a social commentary as well, something on society and pop culture. So like Scream 1, to me, it was obviously the state of horror movies at the time. But also there was a weird kind of side plot of the whole thing with Sydney's mom, where it was a lot of slut shaming. And that was like commenting on that was pretty woke at the time, I think, for 1996, because like Sydney feels shame about it at one point, and then Billy slut shames her to hell, like to the point where he actually kills her, and like blames her for breaking up his parents' marriage. So that's a big plot point for that one, weirdly. And like these movies seem to be ahead of their time, like you said, like kind of predictive of what's coming. Or maybe it's just like Wes Craven had a really good eye for what was happening underneath the surface, and he wanted to bring it to light. So like in Scream 2, they talk about whether graphic media leads to criminal actions, like I talked about earlier, blaming violence on rap, video games, movies, whatever it might be.
Right.
Scream 3, I thought was a commentary on systemic sexual abuse, because it goes back to Sydney's mom and how she was an actress. And it's heavily implied that she slept around to get parts. And one of the big lines that I took from that was, I think from that director who ended up being the one that had the connection to her, that said that he had kind of passed her around at some like casting parties and stuff. Hollywood is full of criminals whose careers are flourishing. Like that movie came out in 2001, and that like just immediately light bulb in my head. I'm like, Harvey Weinstein, like Wes Craven's directly calling out systemic sexual abuse in Hollywood.
Well, like, in a Weinstein film, nonetheless. These are produced by Weinstein.
Yeah,
I noticed that.
That's
I noticed
bold
that.
as fuck.
I was watching the credits inadvertently. I saw it. I was like, what the fuck?
That was the first time I watched the credits, because I'm like, I wonder if this is a Weinstein Company film. And sure enough, it was. Holy shit. Yeah.
Yeah. Really crazy.
Yeah. And then, like we said about Scream 4, it's really about internet culture and making careers out of like tragedy and like things that you shouldn't be famous for. Like you said, Andy, infamous more than anything. But people thrive on attention for some reason, and they'll take anything they can get to get whatever attention they seek out for whatever reason, probably because of heavy mental illness.
Can I say, like, I think Scream 4 deserves a lot of praise because it does a great job at relating to the current time. And, it's 10 years after the last Scream movie. And I feel like it does an awesome job at integrating the story with the current time. It feels seamless. Like when you watch the franchise, like we do, in a pretty close proximity, like we intentionally, watch movies in order for these franchises. But the first three seem very connected, right? 1 and 2 were a year apart, and like we said, it was pretty much pumped out to make some money, which is fine. For me, I actually still like the movie. Number 3 connected directly to the original cast and story and everything. And I think that doing a kind of a reboot 10 years later and integrating the story well enough, as well as relating to the current time with, internet and social media and everything that these characters go through, I think they did a great job. I think Scream 4 was one of my favorites outside of the first one in that franchise for that reason.
Yeah, I would say Scream 4 is like textbook how you do a soft reboot. Like you said, integrating the stories and plot points that were talked about, like not forgetting what happened in the first couple movies, but also trying to reinvent what they did and pile on top of that, make things connect to the modern age and make it just, I don't know, feel so seamless. Like you said, it was, I kind of agree. My rankings, I don't want to get into that too far right now, but top 2, Scream 1 and then Scream 4 for me.
Yeah.
So that probably does it for plot points, unless we want to go into further stuff. If you guys have any.
Well, I think
other
we've
things.
pretty much hit on our plot points in Act 8. Do you guys want to talk about the all of the blood and shit?
There's a
Which
lot
was
of
pretty
blood.
much the only like special effects in this was gore stuff, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And really all practical. You know, it was. I think it fit the trope perfectly. I don't think it was out of place at all. I don't think it was over any expectation.
No,
but I
this
don't know
is-
that there's much to comment on.
It's not monster horror, so you don't have to worry about like CGI or like prosthetics or anything. Everything is practical because it's mostly just being stabbed, shot, with the exception of the Rose McGowan, is that the actress name from the first movie, with the whatchamacallit?
The garage door.
Garage door, yeah.
Yep.
I mean, it's practical.
What a cool kill.
It's my favorite.
Really? Okay, so I know I don't like it because I just think of like that's not how they work. Like that's
Of
not.
course not, but it was awesome.
But I would not
But, like, wouldn't it be cool if they did work that way
Well,
and in that movie?
Okay, but here's like the point I'm making with it. That's where like these irrational fears of garage doors come from. Because they literally got the sensor in them that's like gonna stop it from working if it.
Are you canceling Scream 1 for garage door fears?
No, but I think it's what caused people to be afraid of them. Like at
Andy,
least in
did
my
you throw away
irrational
your
fear.
crock pot when the dad on This Is Us died?
I didn't even watch This Is Us. I don't know what that's a
All
reference
right.
to.
Well, Zach probably gets that reference, but
I do.
yeah, sadly. No, but if you want to get technical about garage doors, if you've got something covering up that sensor, well, I guess it'll just immediately default to not working.
And it doesn't have that little motor. Does not have the ability
It's not gonna
to lift.
it's
a
not gonna
human
do
being
anything.
up.
No, but
No.
what a cool kill, though. Like, just ignore that. It's so fun. She's stuck in a doggy door that she can't fit out of, and her head gets chopped off.
Ah.
But I actually love the idea that it was Matthew Lillard, like that character killing that character in particular. I don't remember that character's name, the one that got killed, but I
they
thought
were
that was
dating,
really
right?
like
Yeah.
like so after finding out who was the killer, you're like, oh, that's brutal.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. But it's one of my favorite kills, no matter how much it makes zero sense. It makes a lot more sense, I'll say, than like most of the kills in the Final Destination franchise.
Oh, without a doubt. Do we have to watch that one?
I hope we never.
We don't have to do anything.
All right, let's not do that one.
I
Yeah.
think of terms of like the practical effects. So that was like the only time where it was like clearly that's like a dummy. The only
Well,
time that's
yeah.
not like anything. Well, I'm just talking about like it
She
were
didn't
describing
die.
the effects. I don't. Obviously,
Rest in peace, Rose McGowan.
but like you can tell in that scene when you watch it that clearly it's a dummy that's in the door, not a human body. So it's not even like they attempted
time.
to like CGI out the harness that's holding her up and putting her in this configuration. No, it's literally just a dummy that's now pulled up and can see it's a dummy.
It was 96. You got to give them a little bit of credit. I think they did a great job.
When did American Werewolf in Paris come out?
Wow, that's an obscure
That's
reference.
a
I
pull.
don't
Yeah,
know.
I don't know.
What?
1997. Yeah.
Why is that relevant?
Just because of the special effects in it
What?
with practical
Oh, okay.
use of practical effects, special effects. Sometimes
All right,
I got
we'll have to check
random
that.
movie knowledge in my head. Okay.
I'll have to check that one out eventually, but I don't know it. So this reminded me more of like, I got more of a Home Alone vibe from this one.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a Home Alone kill that actually killed somebody like it should.
Right.
Usually the wet bandits survive inexplicably.
Not
yeah.
in Scream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different, but it's got that same like those practical effects where the guy's like, you know, it's just like slapstick comedy almost.
Yeah.
You know, it's and I feel like that's the purpose of it. Like it's not super serious. So I liked it. But I mean, what else are you gonna say about the effects? I mean, it's pretty much the kills, right?
Yeah, I mean, we could just talk about our favorite kills. I've got a couple
Let's
different
talk
ones.
about our favorite kills.
Yeah, I mean, let's just skip right to that.
What I mean, the only one I can really think of is the garage one. That's definitely my favorite. I thought that was awesome. Or the the police car one. He runs over. They run over the guys with the car, right?
What?
In the third, I think it's the third one, maybe.
I'm not remembering that.
There was something with a car. I don't know these kills other than the garage one favorite.
I like from the fourth one the two police officers, because they like tell you exactly what's gonna happen. You're like, oh, as soon as one of us leaves, like this is when we're gonna die. So it's either me, I'm gonna get killed, or while you're waiting here, you're gonna get killed. And then they go and they do the thing, and they're like, oh, we didn't get killed, but that's when Ghostface shows up. I really like that one. And then the black police officer's line. Like, I can't remember what he says at the end of it as he's like dying, but it's like some really funny line.
I think he says "fuck John McClane" or something like that, because they were talking about Die Hard.
Yeah.
No, fuck Bruce Willis. That's it. He goes,
fuck Bruce Willis.
Fuck Bruce Willis, and dies.
Yep. Yeah, those are some fun kills. There's another fun kill in that one just from like what happens. It's not even like that creative of a kill. But they establish early on in the movie the rules of like, well, in this one, you pretty much have to be gay to survive. That's the only way you're going to survive it. And the one character who's buddies with Macaulay Culkin's brother's character, who like films everything with him, he ends up dying. And while being stabbed, he comes out of the closet to Ghostface. He's like, you can't kill me, I'm gay. And Ghostface is like, well, fuck it, I'm still killing you.
And is that Jill, or is that the other dude at that point in time?
I don't know. That's the thing. That's one of the fun mysteries of these movies is like, you don't necessarily know who was in the costume when the kills are happening. So like things can be either super impersonal depending on who's in the costume, or they can be super personal. Like if it's Matthew Lillard in the costume, we don't know for sure, but it seems like it's heavily implied it is when they're in the house. Then he kills his own girlfriend.
Well, I think it has to be, because in the meantime, Sydney and Billy are having sex.
I couldn't remember if that was around the same time, so it must be, yeah. But yeah, it's super interesting to look back and like maybe see some more Easter eggs and clues as to who's doing what at what time.
Yeah,
that's true.
I forgot that there were multiple killers in some of these movies as I was watching.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't something I even thought of, except for the first one, because that one I remembered clearly that it was the two of them. So it was like, oh, yeah, that's how they get away with it, thinking that it's not Billy, because they have the ability to disguise as the other person and then kill with them to make it look like Billy is innocent.
Right.
The only other kill that comes to mind is the very first kill of the franchise, where the boyfriend is out on the. You don't see the kill, but the boyfriend. I can't remember his name, but Drew Barrymore's boyfriend is outside on the patio and is like he's gutted. He's just gutted.
Just intestines spilling out.
Yeah, it was brutal. That's the first kill in the franchise.
Yeah. And then her kill too. She's stabbed a shit ton of times and cut up, and then she's just hung from a tree in their front yard. Yeah. That one is brutal, and they zoom right in on her.
That sets the tone for the whole franchise. You're like, this is what we're gonna get into, boys and girls.
Oh yeah. One that I really like, just for like some kind of real world value. Jenny McCarthy is a small character in the third one, and she gets killed, and I just like that she gets killed because she sucks in real life
for sure.
So that's just fun. And I think like the mail slot in 4, Sydney's aunt, when she's like kind of doubled over in front of the front door after they finally close the door on Ghostface, and he just thrusts the knife through the mail slot and gets her in the back of the head. Pretty fucking brutal.
That's a good one.
Yeah, there are some real brutal kills.
Yeah.
The other one, here's what I was thinking of is the car crash when like that pole.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's the Final
when he
Destination
gets
one.
impaled. Yep.
Yeah. That's the one I was thinking of.
And that's a
earlier.
cop driving, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And like they get into the crash, they try to like get out over him,
Yep.
and they
Yep.
do,
Yep.
and then he's gone. Oh,
Absolutely.
then he's gone.
Another kill I do like, as we're talking about these ones, in the third movie, all the actors are now at like the Hollywood home in the hills there, and they've all gathered. I like when Ghostface is sending them the fax messages of like what the script is, and then
That's
because
funny.
they're all actors, they're like, we need to know. So the one dude runs back in, and because this is filmed in late 90s, you don't have cell phones with your LED light on the back, so when you need to find like a quick flashlight in the dark, you have to go for your lighter to hold it up to the paper, and that's the thing that sets off the gas explosion.
That was a good kill.
Yeah. At the time, until you like explained it the way you did, I thought that was really fucking dumb. I'm like, oh, all these circumstances have to happen where he goes back into the house just to read the facts. But like, you're right, because he's just a dumb actor and he wants to go in there and read it. And then also, there's not the cell phone lights that we can just light up. Like, immediately my thought went to like, why don't they just go out there and turn on their fucking cell phones? But yeah, I thought it was stupid at the time when I was watching it, but the way you explained it actually makes sense, and I've changed my tune on it.
No one had their cell phones.
Yeah.
Oh, the film came out in 2000. Okay, so
2000. So like,
yeah,
that's the advent of people getting cell phones, but they're still shitty.
Right. Yeah, they certainly are not going to light up what you need to read.
No.
That was probably my least favorite like motivation, but some of like the kills in the storyline really worked for me.
Yeah. Probably the weakest movie, I would say. I don't know what you guys think about it.
Well,
I agree.
Do we want to get into our movie rankings? Because I don't.
Okay. You know yours? All right, what's yours?
All right, I'll give you mine. So maybe a little controversial, but I like the fourth one better than the first one. And I
don't blame you.
I'm going to defend, because usually like when you kind of put the first one below the sequels, people look down upon that. But I really liked that the fourth one felt like the truest sequel to the previous movies, and because it was a newer movie compared to the other ones, it felt more grounded and realistic than the preceding movies. Then I would go number one, right below that. Can't get better than the original. So the fourth one, I think, delivers in some ways that the first one isn't able to because of the time that the movie came out, but still really good. The next one for me is number three. I really liked number three after number two. Like that, I thought was, oh God, this was horrible. Straight to DVD quality movie. And then we got something refreshing. And I liked that this one fit back in the story. And if I could make a crude comparison, this one reminded me a lot of The Rise of Skywalker, and the second one comparing to The Last Jedi, not in terms of the quality, but like what the intention of the movie was. So number two was to like take another story that happens right after the events of the last one, relatively new or close in the timeline. You get a much smaller story with these characters that you're getting, as opposed to like the big Woodbury thing. But it's like completely different than the last story. Like now we're going to introduce, the killer is the mother of the person from the last film, and it's like this other random dude, and didn't really
fit. Like the legacy film.
Yeah. It doesn't really fit in Sydney's story. It does, but it doesn't. But then the third one ties it right back. Nope, it's all back about Sydney's mom and what she was up to and what she was doing, and this is her character. And that's kind of like what The Rise of Skywalker did, where it went back to like what J.J. Abrams did in the first one. No, this is all about Rey and like what she's doing and blah blah, Kylo Ren, like whatever, kind of trying to get back to the original story that he was attempting to tell. And that's what this third one felt like. It was like, all right, we're going to get back to the original story. We're going to end the trilogy how I wanted it to end. And the second one, it kind of didn't really need to happen. Kind of, we're just going to glaze over everything.
You know what's funny is that you said next to nothing about those Star Wars movies, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, you can pick up what I'm throwing down.
I pick up what you're throwing down. I think you're right.
Well,
it's not a bad.
And then number
Go ahead.
2 is just my least favorite because I thought it was just a complete departure from everything else. It felt really campy and cheesy where the other ones did not feel that way. And I was nervous because, again, I'd seen all these movies before. I just couldn't remember them well. And as I'm watching the second one, I'm like, oh my God, these just get really bad. This is worse and worse than I always thought. And we get to the third one and I was right back into it. But yeah, so number 2, least favorite, did not like it at all.
Least favorite. Okay. I mean, I guess I understand what you're saying, but number 2 is, I think, better than number 3. I didn't like number 3 as much. My ranking would go like, man, it's like a 1A 1B with the episode. Scream 1 and Scream 4. I like them both. I like them both for different reasons. I like Scream 1. It sets the entire trilogy. Oh my God, you got me on Star Wars mode. It sets the entire franchise up, right? I mean, you don't get Scream 4 without Scream 1, but Scream 4, I feel like was, like I said before, it deserves a lot of praise for what it did for this franchise. Like, by the end of 3, you kind of think, okay, that's the trilogy. And then Scream 4 comes in with purpose. It comes in like you buy that it's part of Sydney's story. So I think Scream 4 did a great job at being again 10 years later after the last Scream movie and being just as relevant. So it's got to be 1A 1B with 1 and 4, and I can't even tell you which one is which. Scream 3 Scream 2 I liked. I really did. I don't think it was. I understand what you're saying about it being like over the top, but I felt its intention to be over the top, and I didn't take that as a negative. It was meant to be this, like I said in the beginning of this podcast, the inception of Scream, of slasher films. Like, it's taking you just one level further. And that's what I really liked about it, actually, is it's taking you not necessarily out of the movie, but it's giving you that perspective that you would want as the detective of the story, right? It gives you all of this kind of overview of the characters and within, the movie within the movie. So I actually enjoyed it. And then 3, it didn't. I think the plot in general was what it turned me off. I didn't like the idea of rewriting the story or making the sequel to Stab. I felt it was just the weakest plot of the franchise, and so it didn't really resonate with me. So that's my ranking.
I'm going to go pretty much with what you said. I think 1 just barely edges out 4 just because it is the one that established it and it was groundbreaking at the time. So, like, you can't minimize that. Although I'd make the argument that if I'm going to go back and watch these movies, I would watch 1 again, but I think I'd be more excited to rewatch 4 than 1.
Yeah.
So it's very close, but just by default, I'll give it to 1. And like you said, 4 just does such a great job of that soft reboot, but also just really keeping it within the story. And it really elevates the acting, like, beyond what any of the movies had seen before.
Great
like
point.
Getting an actress like Emma Roberts in there actually made everybody else seem better. Like David Arquette was probably at his best in that movie because he's like the most confident version of himself, and like everybody is fully realized as much as they can be as like these very tropey characters in that movie. So I really enjoyed 4, and 1 is obviously just groundbreaking and wonderful. I'm going to agree with 2 over 3. I agree with what you said, Andy. That still doesn't make it worse than 3 for me. I think I really liked that 2, like, just dove right into, well, this is the sequel, and we're going to explain the rules of the sequel, and we're going to do all the sequel stuff. So it just really dove right in, which is what you expect from it. Maybe it did a little too much, probably because of studio pressure and stuff like that. And again, you're cranking out a movie within 1 year of the last movie. That being said, I think it's just a bit stronger than 3, and I agree with Zach. I don't like the rewriting of the history, I guess, like going back into the history books of Scream and like, oh, well, I was the architect of all of this, kind of like, you did explain it as it relates somewhat to Rise of Skywalker, and I agree with that comparison, but I have huge problems with Rise of Skywalker, and I have a lot of problems with this movie too. So while I can see the comparison and relation to them, I don't like it. So it ultimately is the worst. That being said, it's probably one of the worst movies in a franchise I've seen in a long time. If we go back and look at the worst movies in the franchises that we've watched, I'd say it's stronger than a lot of those.
I would agree with that for sure. For sure. I don't think I really disliked a movie in this franchise. I really liked the franchise, and I don't say that lightly. If you listen to any of our previous episodes, I had a lot of fun through this whole series, and it was really cool to see. So even oh my god, I keep saying episode, Scream 3, though it's my least favorite of the franchise, it really, I enjoyed it still. It was it's a good mix of fun, suspense, and horror that just brings it all together. It's just that's my I guess my overall thoughts of the franchise.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, and it's to hear you guys say that 3 is your least favorite, yet it is preferred over 2 in my opinion. I think that just speaks volumes then about how good this franchise is, because of the fact that if I think 2 is my least favorite of it, one that I would not want to rewatch again, probably I would rewatch 3 if I was forced to, but to get back into and see the things I might have missed through the first rewatch of it. But the whole time, I'm invested in these movies. I can't wait to see, who done it in the end. I like following along. I like trying to guess. I like the jump scares that happen. So it checks all the boxes of a really good movie franchise.
Yeah,
yep,
it
totally
does
agree.
exactly what it set out to do, and it does it well. And that's really all you can ask for with these. It really does speak volumes, like you said, that the worst movie, even if they're different for all of us, is probably not worse than the third-ranked movie in other franchises. It's just such a solid franchise. We talked about the Hunger Games being a solid franchise in the last episode. I think this is probably even more on solid ground than the Hunger Games.
Yep, agreed. Yeah, I think it was just a really good series overall.
Yeah.
So I guess the burning question, guys, who are your favorite killers? What's your favorite team? What's your rank there?
And I guess you could also pick favorite individual if you wanted to, but since most of them are in teams and they kind of play off of each other, I thought it was appropriate to kind of list the teams. So I'll go through those really quick just to remind people. So in the first movie, the killers are Billy and Stu. Billy is Sid's boyfriend, and Stu is, what's her name? Rose McGowan's character's boyfriend, who I cannot remember the name of. In 2, the killers are Mickey, who's a classmate of Sydney's, and Mrs. Loomis, Billy's mom. In 3, the single killer is Roman, her half-brother. And then in 4, the killers are Trevor, who is Rory McCulkin, Cully McCulkin's brother, and Jill, who's her cousin, Sydney's cousin.
Which, by the way, did not know that it was Macaulay Culkin's brother while I was watching it.
Can you see the resemblance now that I mention it, though?
Yeah.
It's in the eyes.
Yeah.
I think he was... the kid in Home Alone, because I know they always tried to insert his brother, even though he was not as good of an actor, into the movies. I think he's the one who Macaulay Culkin complains wets the bed a lot.
That's correct.
In Home Alone.
That is correct.
Yeah.
We can do Home Alone. I am a Home Alone connoisseur.
I would do that. We get to see our current lame duck president, soon to be former president, in Home Alone 2.
And we're heading into the holiday season, so I feel like that's not a bad one to get into. But okay, let's talk about.
Let's circle back to that.
Yeah, the favorite killers.
Put a pin in it.
So Little sidebar with this though, we just glazed over the Timothy Oliphant too. Like that. He's
What do you
a character.
mean?
We've not mentioned Mandalorian. How we've just seen this character in TV, and then we're reminded of him again.
It's
in the
hardly
movie.
relevant. Though, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting there. Like, if you want to talk about Timothy Oliphant, can be.
Yeah, because
Timothy Oliphant's great. But
I'm gonna give some throw some props to Mickey, the character from
too.
Scream 2, because he's played.
Yeah,
it played by
fantastic
him.
casting.
And he does a good job because I did not expect him to be the killer the whole time. So I hate Mrs. Loomis. I think that was a terrible
The
character
worst.
to introduce.
Yeah.
But I liked Mickey as being like, oh, okay, this is kind of cool. He's literally like a psychopath who's going to college, and there's this whole plot that's been developed to get him to do these things. But I like Timothy Oliphant playing this character. I think he did a good job. So I think he was my
right.
favorite killer, but not with the pair. But the favorite pair of killers, definitely Billy and Stu, 100%. Then I'd say throw Trevor and Jill right below them as, again, this kind of like 1 to 4 comparison. Really hard to compete with those two. Didn't care for Roman. The whole throwing in that it's like the half-brother character, which is kind of weird because it would mean that like the mom left her child to like go have like another family, which I guess
that's his whole
fit.
motivation.
Yeah, but it's just like a weird thing. Like I don't believe it. I don't see it as the being good enough to fit the rest of the world that is established in these movies. So I'd say Roman was my least favorite of the actual killers, but Mrs. Loomis takes the cake as being the worst of all of them.
That's fair.
That is fair. All right, but I almost wholly agree with what you said, but I really want to know which Timothy Oliphant character you like better, Cobb Vanth or Mickey.
It's hard to say because we didn't get a lot of Cobb Vanth, nor did we get a lot of Mickey. Like he's a very minor character in these movies.
Yeah.
But I'll have to. Oh, I just sorry, banging my desk really loud there. I'll definitely go with the gunslinger in this case, Cobb Vanth.
Cobb Vanth. Yeah.
Can't go wrong there.
Oh man, can we do a Mandalorian podcast? By the way.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
man.
why don't we?
This
Mando
is about
Mondays.
franchises. It doesn't necessarily have to just be movies.
Boys.
We can branch out.
Well, a quick sidebar. I want to do Mando Mondays on my stream. So if you guys want to hop on stream with me, we can talk about Mandalorian.
Yeah.
All right, Franchise Flicks podcast listeners, you heard right. Mando Mondays on the Darth Buckman stream.
I love it.
All right, but what are you guys' favorite killers teams?
All right, so I like I said, I almost wholly agree with you. Other than Mrs. Loomis, I think that. All right, so Billy and Stu, great killers. I mean, how awesome! And then Stu kind of gets a little effed over in the whole thing, but you expected that. It was. I loved Billy and Stu. Trevor and Jill, my second favorite, specifically Jill. I thought Emma Watson was just unbelievable. I mean, again, like just a tier above the rest of the actors.
I love Emma Watson too, but it was Emma Thompson.
Emma Thompson. No, Emma Robert. What's her name? Emma Roberts.
Yeah.
Not Emma
up all
Thompson
the
either.
You got all the Emmas in this one.
Did I say Emma Watson at first?
You did, but
Emma Roberts. Excuse
maybe
me.
she'll be in 5. We don't know.
Who knows? We gotta touch on that. But Emma Roberts, I thought was phenomenal as Jill. Was she cousin or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Mickey and Mrs. Loomis. I had moments of doubt about Mrs. Loomis. There were parts in that movie where it's like, it's got to be that lady that keeps bothering Gal, and you didn't know it was Mrs. Loomis until the end. But there were parts of like, no, I don't think that's it. So I think that just having that mystery of who the actual killers were in this, I think actually was one of my favorites, because the other ones you didn't necessarily know, but you could guess. This one really surprised me. I didn't think that it was going to be this pair. So I liked them a lot. And then again, it's just the plot, I think, that makes Roman weak here. I liked the movie, but it was definitely the weakest in the franchise. And I think Roman is a big part of that because I just don't like his motive to be killing everybody. So that's mine.
I pretty much agree with that. Maybe Billy and Stu and Trevor and Jill could be interchangeable. I think Trevor drags down Jill a little bit.
That's
I like
true.
his motivation, but I'm not a big fan of his character that much. So I think Billy and Stu maybe get that edge just because they're both really fun characters. I love Mickey. Mrs. Loomis is a little interesting, like you guys said, because I was thinking if she was going to be the killer, it would be because she seemed to be obsessed with Gail for some reason. But that was really kind of throwing you off. And then you find out that she's Billy's mom. So that's like a twist out of nowhere that doesn't necessarily sit well with me. When it's not super set up, it doesn't have to be completely set up, but it has to have some kind of clue. Like, I got that she might be the killer, but her motivations and like who she was came completely out of nowhere for me. And then kind of the same for Roman. Like, there's really nothing to set up that he's the half brother of Sydney. And it's just kind of, that's the reveal at the end. And maybe that's the point in those movies, is like playing up the trope of the twist that wasn't set up at all. I mean, maybe if you go back and look at the script, and maybe that was the intention for Wes Craven, I don't know, but it doesn't work that well.
I don't think that. I didn't read that at all.
No, it's probably not, but who knows?
What I missed what you said there, Ted. Like, what point are you making?
I was just giving possible benefit of the doubt that maybe it was the intention of playing on another trope of not setting up the twist.
You mean in number 2 with Mrs. Loomis?
Both in 2 with Mrs. Loomis and with Roman. I mean, the connection between Roman and Sydney wasn't established until he just says it at the end. Like, you can maybe see why he'd have reason to be a killer for whatever reason, but just because he's like jilted about being stuck with these shitty movies, these stab movies, but outside of that, you really don't see it. And then he just has to explain everything in like the last 5 minutes when he's talking to Sydney, and it just doesn't really work.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. At least they gave setup, though, I think more so than... Because Mrs. Loomis wasn't ever the killer, right? I don't think that's implied. I think she's just the mastermind behind it. She's never in the Ghostface get-up going around killing people.
I think Mickey does reference like saying that she was like the financier, I guess, like in making sure he had everything he needed and was able to get away in certain instances.
So he was the only one that was killing.
That's what they.
I kind of missed that.
I think it's implied because that's one of my problems with this movie. I don't think it's really well addressed. Actually, you don't know. You're guessing because that's the one movie where I have no idea. I don't remember who the killer is. I don't remember who the person who ultimately does this in the end. And then it's like, oh yeah, it's like Timothy Olyphant that we got 2 seconds of at the start of the movie, and then this reporter lady who happens to be Billy's mom, but this is the first time we're hearing that it's Billy's mom. I think to Ted's point, if they had done something like a little better, like laid some clues to it, because at least with Roman, like it was pretty obvious, like he was a suspect right in the scene where it's his voice calling. So the throwaway there is, okay, well, we know it has this voice recorder, but in this case, it's literally him, and he gets framed for it and gets taken in. So, like, they're kind of leading you already down that pathway to, hey, get this guy on your radar. I didn't think that she was ever the killer, Mrs. Loomis, but I definitely think that she was up to something.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it works better in that respect because you can kind of you already have your radar out for this person who keeps bothering Gail Weathers. Like, there's got to be something up with this person, right? But you don't know exactly who she is. But when you find out who she is, it makes perfect sense why, her motive actually makes sense to you.
Yeah.
You get it, right? But I think the difference between her and Roman is that his relationship with Sydney is almost regardless of what his actual motive is. There's no real reason for him to be her like stepbrother, like it doesn't make as much sense in terms of the relationship as Mrs. Loomis did to the story. And then you realize, oh, okay, she's been, either posing as a reporter or just somebody who's bothering this person because she is trying to get revenge on Sydney.
Yeah.
But there's no real reason that I can tell for Roman and his relationship to Sydney.
They both suffer from lack of setup, but in different ways. So like Roman's is like, you can see how he could be the killer, like I said, because clear motivation is fuck these movies. I'm killing all these people as revenge for having to do these movies. But for Mrs. Loomis, she just seems like she's obsessed with Gale. And that's really like the only thing there is. And like, maybe it's just that she's set up as a reporter and she clearly is obsessed with Gale. And maybe that's just like, she wants to be Gale so bad that she's willing to kill her.
Yeah.
But in both aspects, being Billy's mom and then Roman being Sydney's half brother aren't clarified until the very last moment in that penultimate scene. I think the only thing that 2 does better than 3 in this case is at least the misdirect. I like the misdirect of Sydney's boyfriend, who we haven't really touched on. I mean, he's kind of just there. But like her trust issues from what she went through with Billy in the first movie lead her to think that he's possibly behind it, to the point where Mickey's got him strung up in the auditorium and she's like legitimately looking at him like, is he the one who's behind this? Is he a partner of Mickey here? And then he just straight up shoots the guy and reveals that it was him. But that misdirect is good, but that's about it.
Yeah, I think exactly what you said there, Ted, how it's the setup, I think was better for Roman to be thought of as the killer, not necessarily Mrs. Loomis. If they had played into it, not like the whole Billy's mom twist, but that she was just like another reporter trying to be the copycat and play into it, I think that would have been a better version of this character as opposed to Billy's mom, because that's just like a twist that comes out of nowhere, just like Roman is too.
Yeah, I mean, there's really no setup, and you would not have a reason to believe this was Billy's mother until she says it. Yeah, yep. I can see where you're coming from.
Is there anything else we want to touch on?
Any favorite moments? What's your favorite moment in the series? And we'll end on that.
Favorite moment?
I'll start. My favorite moment is when I already touched on this earlier, but it is when they say they always come back. And Mickey wakes up and they have to kill him again. That's my favorite moment. Timothy Olyphant died twice.
Yeah, those are fun moments. I think probably my favorite moment is one that I mentioned earlier myself too. The whole Jamie Kennedy yelling at Jamie Lee Curtis in the movie with the exact same scenario happening behind them. And I just really like
that is good.
Randy as a character. I love that he's just clearly blatantly a plot device and they don't hide it at all, and he does a great job of it. He just goes right the fuck into it and he's very self-aware about it.
Yep.
I can't think of like a single moment that sticks out as my favorite. I'm really struggling to think of what would be just like a particular scene or something a character does. And nothing's coming to mind. Sorry guys, kind of dropped the ball on this one. Can't think of a favorite moment.
No worries.
It's true. I mean, there's a lot of different like moments, but none that really are like super. They're not huge moments until you get to like the reveals of everything. So I just really liked the idea of the scene that I mentioned. So
I think if I had to pick one favorite like moment, or because you said like thing in general with this franchise, the cold opening from the first movie, because I think that sets up exactly what this series is about, and then we get a version of it in every subsequent movie that comes out, but the first one sets this up perfectly, gets us what our expectations are for the film, how the story is going to unfold, what's it even about, all right from that opening scene, and it was just done so well.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
I mean, you can't argue with that for sure.
bring it back to Star Wars really quick. We haven't even mentioned that Carrie Fisher makes a cameo in 3.
Oh
and
my God,
she
you're
makes
so
this great
right.
joke about how, because she plays an actress who looks like Carrie Fisher but was a failed actress,
Yep.
and she said that Carrie Fisher got the parts because she slept with George Lucas, which is just hilarious.
I can't believe nobody mentioned that this whole time.
Yeah. Then there's the other pretty bad cameo of Jay and Silent Bob, where Jay says literally, "Hey, look, Silent Bob, it's Gale Weathers." Like, why are you saying his name? That defeats the purpose of the cameo. People are supposed to point at them and say, "I know who they are," without you telling them. Hated that.
Call out.
Yeah.
The cameos, I thought they were funny, and that they're now that you're just reminding me of them.
I like
There
the
it
Carrie
is.
Fisher one, but that one was just blatantly. It felt kind of like the bring it back to Star Wars again, the R2D2 and C3PO and Rogue One, just like there for no reason.
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks guys for joining us. The last thing we want to talk about before we end the Scream conversation is there's going to be a Scream 5. So it didn't end with 4.
Yeah, I don't know anything about any. Like, is it 2021? Is that when we're
I think
expecting
so.
it?
And it
Or
sounds like
2022.
most of
Is
the
it?
original cast of survivors from the movies is coming back.
Yeah.
Oh,
so-
really? So we're gonna see like Courtney Cox and
I
Neve
think so.
Campbell?
Yep, it's a direct sequel, so it's not going to be like a reboot of the franchise. It's Scream 5. It fits right in with everything else. Here's the disappointing news, though. In an interview with the director, because Wes Craven has died, he's not
Right.
directing this film. It's completely separate
Right.
from the other ones.
Actually, can I interrupt you real
Yeah.
quick? I needed to know, did Wes Craven direct 1, 2, 3, and 4? Did he direct all 4 of them? For some
believe
reason
so.
I missed that.
Think so. I
Did
don't
he
know
direct
about
4?
4. He did direct 4, yes.
Yeah.
He did. Wow.
He
Okay.
was director, writer, and producer for so he direct and produced Scream 4. He did not write Scream 4.
Okay. All right. Either way, I want to give him all the credit for this
Yeah.
franchise. He did a great job.
Well,
with it.
I think they flourished because they had the same guy with the same vision across the board directing these movies.
Hallelujah.
Well, and
Yeah.
that's where the disappointment might come into play with this movie, because in an
Yeah.
interview, and of course I'm forgetting who the director is of Scream 5, but he did indicate that it's not going to play into the kind of like meta analysis of these movies, which
Interesting.
concerns me because I don't know how you continue on Scream without it being meta. It just might mean
Yeah.
they might not go beyond the current level of meta that they're already doing. So it's not going to like change the plot, but you know how it kind of like doubled down on meta. It was like the movie within the movie, and now it was like the movie like having to be like the rewrite of the movie, which I guess is what you could call 4. So I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing or not, but when I did read that, I was like, ooh, that kind of like defeats the whole purpose of this franchise. So I hope this is a bad quote or like a bad interpretation of this quote taken out of context.
Yeah, that's like the main theme in the franchise.
It's the draw of the movies. That's what
Yeah.
did it for me.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, that's gonna
I
be
don't
really
know.
weird. I mean, I'll watch it no matter what. I mean, previous to this episode of our podcast, it was not on my radar at all.
Yeah.
But after watching this franchise, I'm excited to see it. The fact, even like, I mean, it's going to be about the same amount of time as it took from 3 to 4, right? It's about 10 years between the two movies. And hopefully it delivers as big as 4 did for me. Because again, that was one of my favorites in the franchise.
The cast
and I
is
thought they did it.
all like actor. I don't know Jenna Ortega, what she's been in recently,
Oh,
but
nice.
Jack Quaid, he's the dude from The Boys, the Amazon show. Dylan Minnette, I feel like he's been in like Netflix shows. So it's like some of these newer up and coming actors, young ones. So we're probably going to get some kind of young story.
But you said the survivors from the franchise are going to be in it.
Yeah, so Sydney, Dewey, Gale,
David
Deputy
Arquette, huh?
Judy. Apparently, that was the other
Oh,
lady's
the female
name. Yeah.
from 4. Yeah.
She's going to be in it. I think that's it for returning actors who at least have been put on the cast list. I'm sure there might be cameos from other smaller characters. Who knows?
Oh,
I'm not
I hope
familiar
so.
with the directors here. Matt Bettinelli Open and Tyler Gillette. Apparently it's a duo directing it.
Yeah, not familiar.
Don't know what they've done before. Not really gonna look into it.
Not much of a Benioff and Weiss.
For better
I
or
don't
worse.
recognize them, but fair. But we'll see. Either way, I mean, if they're trusting them to make a Scream movie, it should be pretty good. I mean, this franchise hasn't disappointed me yet, so yeah, I guess that's it, boys, about the Scream. I know it's still a little late for Halloween, but that's okay.
Well, people don't know that are listening to audio. They have no clue. No clue.
Well, they do now.
Well, shit. Well, getting away from that, let's talk about what we're doing for next month. So next month in November, unfortunately, we couldn't find any Thanksgiving franchises or even really Thanksgiving movies that I could think of. So we're just going to go with a classic. We're going to go with Back to the Future. Who can beat that? Marty McFly?
It's the power of love. That's what that is.
Hoverboards? Absolutely.
That's the power of love.
And you know what? We can talk about how the Cubs have won the World Series now. We can revisit that prediction.
I think that's the only. Is that like the only true prediction?
Hoverboards in some extent.
I feel like that's a pretty big stretch.
I mean, they're called hoverboards, so I don't know.
But they're also not hoverboards.
Right. They're things that I would definitely fall off of and smash my fucking face on the pavement on.
Do they have the shoes? Is the shoes a real thing?
They
The
did.
self-tying
They
shoes?
did make those.
I feel like they made those, right?
They did.
All right. That's it for me, boys. I gotta go potty. Let's go.
Can we keep that in, please?
Sure. Absolutely. I'm not cutting that out.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, find us on most podcast platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter @FranchiseFlix for new episodes and other content. You can follow Andy on Twitch and Instagram @Darth Buckman and follow Zach on Twitter @_Zach Russo. Talk to you next time.